Blessings, BookTube. Today I would like to talk to you about a story writer named Alexander Kuprin, whose collection, A Slav Soul, has a fascinating title story um, about a slave's soul or a serf soul. Um, so the servant, we'll call him the servant in this story, is very what we would call, what Simone de Beauvoir would call tangential being, not tangential being, um, a conditioned being. In other words, a being whose agency is rests in others' hands, seemingly. Interestingly, at one moment when the servant goes off on a bender and the family has to fend for themselves, it is seen how helpless the family is without the serf. They can't get water, wood, food, everything that they need. They're dependent on their servant. Now, the servant is scrupulous in his service and devotion to the family. At one point, he breaks a pitcher for which his wages are docked. So this I call him a serf, but this is actually after the age of serfdom, although his position is very little changed from that of a serf. Um, Although he does have a passport. Um, anyway, he goes out and buys two pitchers. He comes back and says, "I dare say I'll break another one at some point." So from what little he may earn, he buys two pitchers for the family. So very scrupulous, but nonetheless, every year or so he'll go off drinking. This time is precipitated by the children trying to do him a kindness, but actually sort of embarrasses him by highlighting his position. Um, and he goes off on a bender, and he comes back sort of bare-threaded to auction off all of his goods for more money because everyone's refusing to give him any more vodka. Now his money has run out. And so this crowd of peasants and Jews, sorry to say, in the story, um, are following him, and because they know there's going to be an auction, and he starts throwing his all of his worldly possessions to the crowd. So this being is so lowly that is literally almost in an animal state without possessions. Um, the master steps in, everybody disperses, and he manages to save the servant's like razor case or something pathetic. Um, but nonetheless, the servant goes to the barn to sober up and is laying there in dread, thinking this time for sure the master's gonna get rid of him. Um, how lowly is the state of the servant is shown in this barn scene. As he lays there, and you can just imagine him trying to sober off after a multi-day bender. And he's just laying on the floor of a barn, staring at a fixed point in space. This is where his beloved dog comes and sort of mirrors him, lays next to him, stares off into space. At a certain point, sort of puts his paws around him, and you can really see the two are identified. In the Middle Ages, while they were arguing all sorts of fascinating things like how many angels could fit on the head of a pin, there was this debate whether animals have a soul. And I suspect that is the point of the story, whether slaves have a soul. Because we've seen many stories like this, right, where the servant is seen just from the point of, this whole point is from the point of view of the family, right? How cute he is, right? Laying there in the barn, sleeping it off. By the way, the master's forced to sort of take him back when he gives him his passport and pay packet and marching orders. the servant just refuses to go because he says the family needs him. So he stays on until he dies. Uh, Another scene that shows sort of how contingent he is when as soon as I finish this video, I'll think of that exact word that I want. It's not contingent. It's always the way. But anyway, is when he brings an old, decrepit lady for the blessings to marry her. And they're on their knees before the master, and the master refuses. And interestingly here, whereas before he was sort of identified with the mob, or sort of lower than the mob, in the auction scene, here he's shown to be slightly higher than this poor wretched woman. So he yells at her to get on her knees and beg. But anyway, since the master refuses, he doesn't marry her. So you can see that it's really still a serf position, where every aspect of their life is determined for them by their masters. Seemingly so. However, besides the mysteries of what he does and where he goes when he goes off on these benders, he hears of a death, a hanging, and he goes to the morgue to see the body, and he comes back hysterical, laughing, and the family's perplexed. But that's it. There's no more information at all until the servant himself is found hanged. And I would argue that this is the act that affirms that he has a soul, that he has a whole story beyond this family that we know nothing of. And I think that is the brilliance of the story A Slav Soul by Alexander Kuprin. Give it a read.